USA, Connecticut, Vanessa Hudgens's apartment. Vanessa came home with a basket of fruit. She received a scholarship and decided to please her family. Her mother, Cicely Hudgens, was not delighted. The neighbor from the apartment across the street had already received a bonus for her work from the company, and her daughter was bragging about some kind of scholarship. The mother warned her daughter that if these fruits were not bought at Doris's store, then she could take them back, because her brothers would not eat it. Vanessa's brothers entered the apartment. Their mother was very happy with them and invited them to go for a ride to their grandmother. Older brother Travis entered a prestigious university because they gave her something. But Vanessa didn't need to know that. As she was leaving, the mother shouted that if the girl had nothing else to show, then let her take the fruit and leave. Vanessa was in complete apathy. She had recently moved away from her family, did everything possible to study, and she had to endure such an attitude from her family all her life. She really wanted to be adopted, like the main character from her favorite short story, which she read every time before going to bed. Deep down, she envied his happiness and loving family. She fell asleep reading, and when she woke up, she realized that something was wrong. She was in a different world, a different person. There were dragons, ornaments, and paintings everywhere. She was sure that she was in the world from her favorite novel, The Myler Family. She decided to enjoy her new life, as pink as her new hair. Vanessa seemed to have been doused with cold water. She remembered that her favorite main character has black hair. But who is she then? Her heroine was Jessica Miller, an illegitimate daughter, not recognized even by her family due to her reckless behavior. A happy child able to remain in her family thanks to her ancestors. But when she was 5 years old, at a New Year's party, due to an accident in her family tree, they doubted him and threw him out of the family. She was drinking hot chocolate with marshmallows and didn't understand why she became a secondary heroine and not her favorite. And at that moment, someone loudly called out to her. It was her nanny, Miss Rosie, who saw the girl drinking cocoa. She jumped up to her, afraid that it was hot and the girl would get burned. The nanny was happy that Jessica liked her drink. Rosie was her nanny, who, abandoned by this world, taught many things, took care of her little sister, so the girl trusted her more than her previous family. Miss Rosie reminded Jessica that tomorrow was the New Year's ball. The girl choked, and the cup of hot chocolate ended up on her. She realized that tomorrow was the day she would be thrown out. Jessica quickly ran away, asking the nanny to take all the chocolate to her room. For starters, she decided to find a new home. She had to dismantle the entire library in search of a better shelter. Jessica was dumbfounded. In the library, she saw a guy of extraordinary beauty, but couldn't remember him, even though she had read the entire novel. His hair was beautiful. His golden eyes shone like honey. It seemed that God had put his whole soul into his creation. This was the main candidate for Myler's successor, Harry Myler. Harry asked her if she knew where the book about divine magic was. Jessica replied that the book was in the second column in the first cabinet. The girl found what she was looking for, a shelter run by a retired hero of the Great War. Harry thanked the girl. He was curious how she knew such a large library. Then he drew attention to the book that she took for herself. She was supposed to be kicked out tomorrow, but she couldn't get caught so easily and lied to him that she was reading the practice of natural calculus. The guy smiled. He didn't understand anything. He took his book and went. Jessica remembered why she was kicked out of her family. She turned into a lizard at the New Year's celebration, but it happened a day earlier now. She didn't know how to turn back, however. She was sure that she should hide now and dragged her things behind the shelf. On the floor, she found a ring. It belonged to Harry Myler. The guy returned for his ring and found a pile of things on the floor. He went to pick them up, and Jessica crawled out from under the things. She laughed and showed him it was missing. Harry returned because the ring was very dear to him. He thanked the girl for finding it. Having given the ring, she began to run from the library. Myler Estate, large banquet hall. All the family members were in the hall. Jessica was amazed by the beauty of this hall and remembered her transformation. The master of ceremonies announced that Duke William Myler had arrived, the 12th head of the Myler family. Next to the Duke stood his sons, Harry Myler, already familiar to Jessica, and his second son, Oscar Myler. These people inherited the most dragon blood. Harry waved to Jessica, and people around began to whisper about it. She waved back. The Duke scolded his subordinates. Essentially, the New Year's celebration was an event where the Duke explores all the dark events of the past year. William Myler noticed Jessica and called her a little fluff. Harry asked to call her by name. At that moment, the girl stood and did not move. The head of the family asked what the girl's plan was for the new year. She was going through the options in her head, but none of them were suitable for answering the Duke. And in the end, she said that she wanted to leave so that no one would bother her. The Duke and everyone in the hall were at a loss. He asked her why she wanted to leave the house, and then again, Jessica did not have a suitable answer. But luckily for her, William was informed that the mine had collapsed, and the manager and several workers were trapped. The head of the family immediately forgot about the girl and began to think about how to ensure the safety of the victims before anyone died. Time passed by minutes. He ordered that the celebration be held again in a few days. Before that, no one should leave. Pointing his finger at those who should follow him, William turned to Jessica and said that she was also following him. She was confused and cried, asking for a handkerchief. The person present in the hall handed her a handkerchief, when the Duke tore it out of her hands and said in an ominous tone that he did not tell her to wipe away her tears and that the next celebration would begin with her. Let her prepare more thoroughly. Jessica was sitting in the courtyard by the fountain and thinking about yesterday, when suddenly a piece of paper flew at her. The boys who abandoned her began to laugh at the girl, calling her a crybaby and shouting that she had no friends or home. The guys did not stop discussing among themselves that Jessica had no parents and no one to teach her good manners. Their mothers told them not to play with such people. While the boys laughed at her, she took a large boulder, swung it, and hit one of them in the head. They started shouting that they would tell everything to their mothers, but Jessica was so angry that she didn't care. She read that it was better not to have parents than to be born with a character like theirs. When the guys ran away, Jessica sat down and thought that the ugly duckling appears in a family for a reason, but only when the strong ignore the weak. This was the case in her real family, so her brothers allowed themselves everything. A cat approached her. The girl was happy, and she had a friend. Harry observed this whole situation from the window of the estate. He found it funny. Jessica interested him in the library when she was studying lists of shelters. A week later, New Year's celebrations resumed. As Duke William promised, the celebration began with Jessica. He tried to find out why she wanted to leave. The girl said that it was because of the secret of her birth. To the surprise of everyone, Harry came out and declared that Jessica was his daughter. The girl was shocked. She planned to tell her secret and leave, but this was not the outcome of the situation. The Duke did not believe Harry's words, but he said that if William did not believe him, he could ask his daughter. The guy began to whisper to Jessica not to pay attention to her grandfather. He had grown old and began to doubt everything. The Duke was furious. After listening to Harry, the girl confirmed that he was her father. Everyone in the hall whispered that this was not the first time. Last year, the heir brought a boy, but he lasted only 4 months. Jessica thought in her head how good it would be to live if she stayed here for 6 months, because according to the rules, if you leave, they give you so much money that you can buy a small island. Harry did not stop playing to the public. He grabbed the girl and said that for the sake of his daughter, with whom he was finally reunited, he had to become a good father. The Duke began to shout at Harry Miller. Jessica looked at William with puppy eyes and asked him not to swear. The Duke agreed, but decided to end the celebration and asked to collect all the plans and bring them to his office. Harry was still holding Jessica in his arms when everyone began to leave. They went too. She thought that he would leave her as soon as everyone left, but he carried her very carefully. The girl did not understand why he behaved this way, because in the novel his hero was a strong manipulator. He played with people, and for sure she was just another toy for him. Waking up, Jessica saw Harry on her bed. He wished her good morning. A week had already passed since the celebration, and Myler, who called himself her father, gave the girl a room, as if it had been specially made for her, and on top of everything else, he himself came in the morning with breakfast. Harry asked Jessica every morning if she wanted anything, and this time she was wondering what to answer him, whether to ask for money or return her nanny. She asked for his bank account. The guy was surprised by such a request. Jessica was sure that this was just a game, and she was playing the role of Harry's obedient daughter, and could she wait until she was thrown out of there? The heir thought for a moment. Now he clearly understood that this little girl wanted to run away, but after thinking about it, he agreed to open an account for her. Harry and his daughter headed to the bank. The girl was outside the estate for the first time. She was absolutely delighted. The guy invited her to look at the toy store, but Jessica refused. She never played with toys. The bill would have been enough for her. Harry was touched by her good manners, and that the girl was not at all greedy, and he wanted to please her. He still took her to the toy store. The heir gave the store owner 50 gold pieces and asked him to wrap all the store's toys. Jessica began to scream that she didn't need this, and then Harry set a condition for her. Either she chooses herself, or he buys her all the toys in the store. The girl ran to choose. This world was full of strange toys. Some were so strange that you couldn't get enough of them until you touched them. But the girl believed that it was clearly not worth 50 gold, and it would be better if he gave this money to her. Jessica chose a stuffed tiger, telling Harry he looked like his daddy. The heir asked if anyone had bought these toys and how many were left. The store owner pointed to the counter. This was all they had, and they were the first customers, since these toys had just appeared on sale. Harry snapped his fingers, and the store owner said that he would get rid of the rest of the toys, and at that very second, the tigers burst into flames. The man began to call for help. Mr. Myler threw a bag of gold at him and ordered him not to throw hysterics. As soon as the toys burned, the fire would disappear. As he left, he said that he hoped that these toys would stop selling when they saw how much gold he gave them. Now only Jessica had a doll resembling Harry. She was shocked by what happened. The Myler family was sitting at the dinner table, and the heir was spoon-feeding Jessica in front of the head of the family. William was furious. The family holds meetings 2 times a week. The Mylers manage a major military project, are involved in various businesses, and it is at such meetings that they discuss all this, so the whole family must be present, because we are talking about very important things. Jessica asked her grandfather not to swear at her, and he took pity, saying that really, let her eat her pudding and generally do what she wants. William continued the discussion. He was concerned about the important issue of floating stone. The more they dug, the worse the quality became, and the mine was running out as productivity began to decline. Vanessa's heroine realized that the floating stone is one of the most important elements of the novel. It is a resource literally floating in the sky. In the novella, the main character found the entrance to a cave of floating stone in the mountains behind the Duke's estate. Jessica asked her daddy what kind of floating stone was. He said that it was a useless stone flying in the sky. If mixed with iron, the weight of the weapon would decrease a little. The girl pretended to be surprised, but she knew everything that this stone would soon change the situation of the war and practically lead to a revolution. The Duke became curious why Jessica asked about the stone. William was once again furious. He hit the table and it split. She had to tell him where she saw this stone. Pointing her finger at the mountains behind the estate, Jessica said that she saw this stone there. All those present began to actively discuss this. It turned out that it was precisely those mountains that scientists had not yet explored, and the Duke ordered them to be immediately explored. Harry patted the girl on the head and, smiling, said that he wondered how she knew so much. His subject approached William and said that his daughter had appeared. He ended the meeting and left. The heir took the girl in his arms and began to leave, promising to introduce her to someone tomorrow. Harry put Jessica to bed and said that if she wanted pudding again, let her tell him he would give her whatever she wanted. Her plan was completely ready, so she was already expecting that when the main character appeared, everything would return to normal. The girl woke up in a cold sweat. She had a nightmare that her dad gave her everything, but as soon as he found out about her transformation into a lizard, he immediately threw her out of the estate. Her so-called brothers came for Jessica. Her father suddenly asked them to bring her. The heroine couldn't keep up with the boys. They turned and headed towards her. She expected that now they would hit her, or even worse, as was the case in Vanessa's childhood. But the guys were very polite. One helped carry her toy, and the second put her on his shoulders, Jessica. One of the brothers decided to give her advice so that she would not become attached to his dad. He is one of those who likes to play, and no matter what he says, she would not be very offended. The guys entered the dining room, and Jessica threw herself into Harry's arms. The heir and his son Harold discussed that the head of the family left the estate early in the morning, and the daughter of Harry's sister was found. Harry threw Jessica off his lap and ordered his brothers to urgently take the girl and run away from here. One of the family's secrets was to experience a bloodlust from unbridled power. People called it the Berserker phenomenon. Vanessa remembered that she read this in the novel. It was at that moment that Harry became a real monster of the Myler family, which means it will happen today. The girl remembered that she had read in a novel about a medicine that could help with the Berserker phenomenon and rushed to look for it. She knew that this was madness, but if Dad ended up in prison, then her whole plan would collapse. Jessica found it in a warm place, covered with a huge shadow, a red currant tree, the key ingredient for the cure for the Berserker. Having collected a whole bag of berries, the girl ran to her father to give it to him, but heard a scream from the dining room. Harry could no longer be stopped. He was strangling the servants, not realizing his actions. Jessica began to approach him when Harold burst into the hall and began to shout, stopping her, but it was too late. The heir grabbed the baby by the throat. She bit him. Harry screamed in pain, and Jessica took the opportunity to put several berries in his mouth. The effect of the berries worked. He came to his senses. The girl began to cry and beg him not to be angry anymore. Dad calmed her down and said that now everything would be fine. Harold ran to his father and sister and began to examine her to see if everything was okay. But fortunately, she was not seriously injured. The heir thought, when someone falls into a berserker, there is only one way to stop him. A person who is stronger than the one who has become a berserker can suppress his power. However, the Duke, like Harry's older brother, were outside the city. No one could stop him. But this girl, Harry's second son Hansel, entered the room. He wanted an explanation of how the berserker was stopped, but Harold just waved his hand and asked his brother to find red currant berries and take them to his laboratory. The whole answer is possible in them. Harold asked his father to stop his game before it was too late. He felt sorry for Jessica. She helped her father, risking her life to save him. The heir ordered his son not to meddle in his own affairs. He would sort it out himself and left with Jessica sleeping in his arms. The girl woke up in her room and immediately remembered that when she was picking berries, she poured her gold ones out of the bag. At that moment, the nanny ran up to her, telling her that she had finally woken up. They had been waiting for a whole week and were worried. A girl approached the maids and asked how to get to the Duke. The girl showed her the way. She thanked her and went. They had never seen a cuter girl in their lives, but they didn't know who it was, either the daughter of an aristocrat or a princess. This was the main character of the novel, Ariel Myler, with the ability to stop a berserker and also an ideal character. Everyone immediately fell in love with her. Ariel was the child who melted Harry's icy heart. Initially, Harry used her only when necessary, but as the story progressed, they began to open up to each other, a precious creature raised by a cold-blooded father, a heroine loved by everyone. Vanessa always wanted to be in the place of the main character. Then her family would love her. But she soon realized that these were just her dreams. Everyone was worried about Jessica. Her brothers Harold and Hansel came every day, and the Duke asked to tell her when she would wake up. Mr. Harry came once a couple of days ago. The nanny told the girl that the Duke had brought the daughter of the deceased princess, and her adoption was now being discussed. Perhaps that is why the heir was so busy. After breakfast, Rosie began to prepare the girl for the trip to the Duke. The head of the family began by saying that thanks to Jessica, the production of the Flying Stone was launched, and she also helped Harry while William was away. A reward awaited the girl. She could ask for anything, and the Duke would fulfill any of her wishes, be it the right to the family's business, the right of a direct descendant, or whatever. Jessica asked for money to transfer 1 million gold to her account. William thought this desire was too simple and not worth all that she had done, so he gave her his platinum bracelet, which was worth 100 million gold. Harry took this bracelet from her, turning it into a joke that you shouldn't put anything in your mouth. You need to be selective with food, and gave her his bracelet instead of his father's, which was worth 1 billion gold. Jessica was overjoyed and overwhelmed with emotion. The Duke, as usual, was dissatisfied. He changed the topic and suggested that his son begin the procedure for adopting Ariel. This would be a good help for him. Harry did not intend to adopt Ariel. He told his father that he already had a daughter. Jessica realized that it was time for her. She didn't want to interfere in family squabbles, especially since she already had so much money to escape. So she went to her room. She left earlier than the nanny expected her. The girl wanted to take a nap, and Rosie immediately became alarmed because she had to prepare the bed. But Jessica said that she could handle it herself and ran into the room. The nanny stood at the window and smiled mysteriously. She thought that maybe a little earlier than planned, but now she must complete her mission. 5 p.m. estate extension. Some time ago, when Jessica was preparing to escape, she had the urge to go where she had never been able to, namely in the annex for her stolen things. On the way there, she met guards, but they dispersed calmly. But then another figure caught her attention. It was her nanny Rosie, and she was carrying something, looking around. Jessica woke up in the morning in her room. Half of yesterday disappeared from her mind. The last thing she remembered was being in the annex of the estate, and then waiting for dinner and falling asleep right in the estate. The nanny was tidying up the room and casually told the girls' latest gossip that yesterday the Duke was beside himself with anger. Jessica urgently needed to meet with Harry. She changed clothes and ran to him. Entering his room, the girl saw him there with Ariel. Jessica had already begun to leave when her dad stopped her and asked her to enter. The little girl asked if her grandfather was angry with him. Harry replied that if she had never seen a sword spew fire, then she should get ready for the show. An angry Duke burst into the room, shouting at his son, "How dare he take the family mine for himself?" The heir asked the Duke to express himself more decently, and that he himself said that he would give up the family mine. William did not let up. He said this 2 years ago, but then his son refused, and now he must immediately return the mine. Otherwise, all he will get is the mountain behind the estate. Harry remained completely calm and asked his father to leave. Otherwise, he would interfere with his conversation with his daughter. The father was not going to leave. And then the heir snapped his fingers and carried his father into the estate yard to their pet dogs, while he remained with his daughter and Ariel. He returned her tiger to Jessica. It was like new. The girl was glad that the doll was intact. It even seemed to her that it had become even softer. Ariel approached the baby and asked to touch her cheek. The girl agreed, thinking that she was talking about a doll, but Ariel grabbed Jessica's cheek. The heroine hugged her little sister. Ariel was very glad that she had a little sister because she was 8 years old, and Jessica was only 5. Harry watched this scene of tenderness in bewilderment. Vanessa's character was about to leave tonight, since the main character had already appeared and the original novella had begun to develop. She could not interfere anymore because Ariel had to take her place. At breakfast, Ariel hugged Jessica. From the moment she got into the Myler house, she felt somehow strange and worried. But now she felt much calmer with her little sister. The baby reassured her, especially since her older sister would soon become her uncle's daughter. Ariel suddenly became serious and told Jessica that she did not want to be his daughter and came to the estate only because she needed protection. Vanessa's heroine wondered if Ariel was like that in the novel. She really didn't like Harry. But in the original, she wasn't so apathetic. Later, many events were supposed to bring them closer together. In the novel, after the arrival of the main character, someone stole the dragon artifact of the Myler family and ran away. In this family, each artifact chooses its own owner. There are 3 of them, inherited. The first was a sword that spewed fire, belonging to William. The second was a balance earring belonging to Harry. And the third artifact was the Dragon Ball. In the novella, the second artifact, an earring, was stolen. For this reason, the Duke could easily get rid of his son. But Ariel resolved the situation. And then Vanessa realized that she had read the novella many times, but could not remember who stole it. Ariel noticed that Jessica was thinking about something and assured her that if she wanted to say something, then let her say it. The girl would help her with anything. The baby laughed it off and said that she was thinking about today's menu. The older sister took her hand and said carefully that she hoped that Jessica would always be happy. That night, all the bags Jessica had packed for her escape were put deep in the closet. While dressing the girl, the nanny asked if she had prepared a gift for Mr. Harry. It was his birthday today, and since she was his only daughter, she should be the first to give something. Rosie suggested that Jessica give her father shards of a precious stone. One of the shards was in his earring, and he would be happy to receive the other shards, and she just knew where they were. And then it dawned on Vanessa's heroine. She remembered everything. The person who stole the artifact was her nanny, Rosie. The nanny insisted, because she cared so much about Jessica. Couldn't she really do this for her? But the girl was adamant. Her father said that stealing was bad. Leaving the baby's room, Rosie threatened that she would regret it. She knew that Jessica, the beast maker and nanny, intended to reveal her secret. The girl lay and thought why everything in her life always goes wrong. Full moon, the dragon's quiet night, when the blood and madness of the Myler family fall into a long sleep. On such a day, the family's strength weakens, so the palace guards have been strengthened. Something happened. The head butler of the Myler family approached the girl and asked Jessica to follow him. Together with her nanny, she stood before the Duke, who was informed that Jessica had conspired with the man in black and stole his earrings. The little girl decided to confess and said that she was a lizard, and at that second her head began to spin and a transformation occurred. Everyone in the hall began to scream. Someone was hiding. Someone was trying to catch the lizard, which was quickly running towards the exit from the hall. They stepped on her tail. Jessica threw it off and climbed onto the wall. People in the hall whispered, calling the girl all sorts of dirty names. But Harry remained calm. He walked up to the wall, put his hands up, and asked Jessica to come down. Her paws unhooked from the wall and she fell down. A lizard woke up in the forest on its toy. Someone brought it here. Out of nowhere, a boy came up, took her in his arms, examined her tail, and said that he also had no parents, and they were in the same position, so now the lizard would be his animal. Rosie was happy that her plan worked. Now she needed to return to the guild and move on with her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by Harry. She took a knife and stabbed the nanny for letting his daughter cry. The Duke stopped the son. He forbade him to shed blood, but the guy blamed his father for everything. If he had not started everything, nothing would have happened. William blamed his son for everything because he brought Jessica here from the very beginning. Then he said that she was his daughter. Besides, she turned out to be a lizard, and there is a possibility that the family's pedigree will be shaken. Harry told his father that he would decide what to do with his daughter, turned around, and began to leave, telling the head of the family that he would not be home for some time. It was a noisy day at the estate. The head butler went in search of Jessica. The stranger gave the lizard the name Bom Bom. Before her was a mystical, handsome boy, deprived of the gift of giving names, one of the male minor characters of the novel, as well as the owner of the magic tower in the future, Richard Colin. Readers of the novel often called him crazy. From the moment she got to Richard, Jessica tried to return back to human form, but nothing worked for her. Richard Colin was the same poor child who lived in restrictions from birth, had a different intellect from everyone else, as well as a talent for magic, and he did not yet have parents. The boy talked to the lizard, promising her to show everyone that she was no different from others and to take revenge on those who bullied her. The director of the orphanage entered the room. He was outraged that Richard was not in class and also had a pet, which is strictly prohibited in the orphanage. The director headed towards the lizard, but the boy stopped him, saying that he would not forgive anyone who touched his things, even if it was the director. Jessica decided to run before she was put in a cage or something worse. The director looked at it and gave up. The lizard was too small and he allowed Richard to keep it, provided that he trained the animal well. The boy began to kiss the lizard and say that if she decided to run away from him, he would get her even in hell. Don't forget, Richard Colin is a minor character, the future owner of the magic tower, and also the craziest among the brilliant magicians. The boy entered the orphanage cafeteria. The guys behind his back were whispering that the director loved him, allowed him to use a single room, probably because he was a slave. The director felt sorry for him. Richard heard all this talk, grabbed a whole plate of food, walked up to one of the guys and turned it all on him, calling him too noisy, a stupid pig. The director came into the dining room and stopped Richard. The boy was beside himself with anger. He wanted his offenders to die. The lizard sat on the windowsill and waited for the boy with fruit. But he did not come, and instead the director appeared and asked for help to find Richard. He disappeared. The director flew like crazy and asked the lizard if she could smell the boy, but Jessica only wanted him to stop. She was worried for her life. They reached the village. The man left the lizard on the boxes because it was dangerous for her to go to the village. Jessica didn't know if she would succeed, but she tried to find Richard by smell. It's not for nothing that they say that lizards have a good sense of smell. She succeeded. She found the boy. He was sitting on a swing and crying. How happy he was to see the lizard. The guys from the orphanage upset him greatly, especially this Ash, who told everyone that he would be adopted soon and boasted that he had found new parents. He didn't complain, but sometimes he wondered why his parents left him. Were ordinary people really so afraid of magicians that they were ready to abandon their own child? The lizard promised Richard to find him a family, but now they need to return. The director is looking for him. The boy sat in complete shock. He, of course, knew that Bomb Bomb understood everything, but he did not expect that he could talk. The friends found the director and all went back to the shelter together. Richard was already asleep, and Bomb Bomb was sitting on the window and thinking. The director did not come up to him and thank him. The boy felt better after meeting the animal. Although he looked strong, he remained a lonely child at heart. He was bullied and humiliated because of his abilities, so he closed his mind. Bomb Bomb lay down next to Richard and thought that tomorrow, when she opens her eyes, she wants to be a human. The boy returned from training in a good mood, but instead of a lizard, a girl with pink hair was waiting for him. Richard didn't let her explain. When he saw Bomb Bomb's discarded skin in her hand, he became angry and was about to use his magic when the director entered the room shouting. The director understood what was happening. A lizard man stood in front of them, but he did not understand what she was doing here, since usually lizard people live in tropical regions, and they rarely come here. The man did not go into detail about where her relatives were, since he saw from her that this topic was sore for her. He allowed her to stay with Richard, but first, he needed to deal with her tail. After discussing everything, the director said that he would find out in the capital about her tail. He just had a couple of things to do there. Richard pulled out a jewelry box from his hiding place that he had collected while walking around the backyard to show Jessica. 3 days passed from the moment she became human. The boy brought her to the forest not far from the medical school. He had his own secret in this forest. He took out a blue stone. Jessica immediately realized what it was. The same one was in Harry's earring. Richard was ready to give her the stone, but in exchange for anything, the only thing Jessica could offer him was to take the boy with her to the capital. He thought for a long time. Richard didn't want to go to the capital, believing that it was very dirty and stinky. But in the end, he agreed, on the condition that if he didn't like it there, Jessica would stay with him forever. The girl promised him. The guys had a plan. Tomorrow morning, the director would leave for the capital on a carriage. Before that, he would introduce the new teacher to the children. At that moment, they would hide under the carrier's seat if they were not discovered ahead of time. Richard knew that the director would not allow them, and what would happen if he discovered them, and they would have to travel to the capital for a week. In general, Jessica had a different goal, to bring Richard to his family, Duke Colin, and get Harry's fragment, and then withdraw funds from the account. The boy gave in. The persuasion of his new girlfriend worked. And even more so, he believed that they were now a family, and no matter what Bomb Bomb came up with, he would be with her. Up to this point, everything was going well. But the children did not expect that the carriage would be so crowded, and when the carriage drove over the stones, their failure was very close. Miller family estate. Ariel had the gift of cleansing. Usually 10 minutes was enough for a person to completely calm down, but in the case of Harry, there was something wrong. He pulled his hand away and sent the girl into the room, saying that it was a waste of time. The gentleman was waiting for news about Jessica, but there was none. No one could find her. He even ordered that if she appeared at the bank, he would be immediately reported. Harry went into her room, but instead of a joyful daughter, there was again an empty, cold bed. It was just supposed to be a joke. He became interested when he felt the energy from the ring that Jessica found in the library, time after time, tired of his toys. He wanted to put on a funny scene of daddy and daughter, and then get rid of it. However, probably from that moment on, from just an interesting fake relationship, it grew into a real concern. Harry asked his sons to cancel all meetings for today, including the meeting with Duke William. He needed to go away. The heir did not understand why Jessica left the house. He promised her money, shelter, anything. Did she really lack sincerity? The guys failed and were discovered by the director. They begged him to take them with him. Something important was happening in the capital. But the man was adamant. He believed that the capital was dangerous for children and full of criminals at night. Jessica showed the stone. She had to personally hand it over to the Myler family, and if the director went himself, then suspicions might arise. She was sorry that she had to bother him with her reckless behavior, but it was really important. The director gave up, but along the way, the girl had to tell him everything in detail. They arrived at the hotel. The man was leaving for 4 days. The children had to wait for him and not go anywhere. If something happened, he left them a necklace for communication. When the director returns, they will discuss everything regarding Jessica's stone. But for now, they must sit quietly. With snacks, a communication device, emergency beads, a cloak, a letter, and an emergency fund of 3,000 gold, the girl hatched an escape plan. It will be quite difficult to reach Colin's family, but withdrawing money will be even more problematic. Jessica was ready to run, although she was scared, but she had an adult mind. She believed that she was only doing what was best for Richard. On the street of the capital, she saw a homeless boy. Although the girl was hungry, she decided that the boy needed her more tomorrow and came up to give her buns. Vanessa thought about the short story. The beauty of the main characters was described in full, and the appearance of the secondary characters was depicted only for show. This boy was so handsome that anyone would recognize this beauty, and the girl was sure that this was one of the main characters of the short story. She just didn't like him, remembers. Having given him the food, the girl rushed away, telling the boy that if he found Ariel Myler, she would definitely help him. Miller family estate. The Duke sat in his office and waited for news about Jessica, but the butler reassured him. There was still no news. The head of the family blamed himself for treating the girl so harshly, and his son, now doing stupid things, first canceled the meeting, then canceled another one with the Marquis and another. The director came to the tavern to get his order. These were VIP tickets for the auction, which were quite problematic to get. The number of people getting there was very large. The owner of the tavern did not understand what he needed there. People were being sold at auction, and the director despised it. He intended to save the children by buying them to take them to the orphanage, but he had better prepare. The auction was going to be huge. The auctioneer was Oscar Campbell, the owner of all the information of the underground world. His information network is so extensive that even the emperor cannot compete. The director drew attention to the man before whom the tavern workers were bowing. It was Mr. Harry Myler. The owner did not know who it was, but he knew that his daughter was missing, and the gentleman was looking for her. Jessica walked down the street, followed by a boy to whom she gave her breakfast. When she stopped to drive him away, he asked to go with her, since he had nowhere to go. He recognized her as his mentor and, falling to his knees, asked to call her that. They were surrounded by passers-by. They began to whisper that she was so cruel for her age, and that this was her slave. Jessica could not find a place for herself with shame. The girl agreed that he would go with her, if only he would quickly get up from his knees. The boy followed and repeated every now and then, calling her a mentor. Approaching the carrier, Jessica asked to be taken to the Colin estate, but she was refused, since children without parents were not transported. The boy said that he knew where this estate was and he would take her there, but the girl refused. She did not want to walk. He fell to his knees again in front of Jessica. At that moment, she agreed to anything if only the boy would get up. A minute later, they found themselves at Duke Colin's estate. It turned out that they just had to walk along the alley in front of the main street. Jessica approached the guards and asked them to let her in, since she knew that Duke Colin was looking for his missing son. The guards were hesitant at first, but then they decided to let her in. But first, they needed to get the Duke's permission. Jessica was glad that her plan was almost a success, because this is the family that she so wanted in real life, but did not get. She stood and wondered how Richard was doing, if he had seen her letter. After reading the letter, the boy began to crumble everything in his path. He was very angry with Jessica for her action. Duke Colin was waiting for her in his office. He loved brevity and speed and did not hate lies. Jessica listed all the external features of Richard, but anyone who had ever seen Duke Colin could know this. And then she remembered another distinctive feature. The boy had an earring, a long, white, square earring on his right ear. The Duke took out the second earring and showed it to Jessica. It was her when Richard used ice magic. Ice appeared on it. The eldest Colin was very happy. It seemed he had finally found his son. He thanked the girl and asked for the address of Richard's location. Tomorrow, a cart would leave for him. Near the estate, a boy was waiting for Jessica. Like a faithful puppy, she began to fold the gold pieces she received from the Duke, and a pebble fell out. The boy picked it up. He was surprised at this coincidence. He had the same 2 stones. In the novella, only the important main characters had them. There are 7 of them in total. Harry has 3, Richard has 2, and someone else has 2. Fragment of Balance, one of the dragon artifacts. In the original, it is called the Stone of Balance. The first head of the Myler clan asked the Black Dragon for permission to divide the stones to distribute to everyone in need, and so the artifact spread throughout the world. The result was 7 fragments. 3 belonged to Harry Miller, 1 to Richard, 1 was missing, and the remaining 2 belonged to the future Great Priest, namely Jessica's new acquaintance, Alex. The boy invited her to take his stones, but Jessica refused. It is not known what she would get into by taking the stones from a child who does not know who he is. The girl invited Alex to go with her. Since he had nowhere to go, he was very happy. They returned to the hotel. Jessica asked her new acquaintance to wait outside while she talked to someone. Entering the room, she saw the destruction. Richard was standing at the window. The girl said that she had found his father, and that tomorrow he would send a cart for his son. Richard was angry. He considered Jessica a traitor and that she was abandoning him just like her family. She showed him an advertisement about the disappearance of a little boy. His parents were waiting for him every day, looking for him, and hoping that he had been living somewhere peacefully for the last 10 years. Richard burst into tears. He couldn't believe it all. It seemed to him that it was a dream. Colin family estate. Duke Colin was informed that based on the results of the magic item, there was a possibility that this was the lost son. The Duke sat over photographs of his son and could not believe that he could be alive. Richard was persistent. He wanted that if he returned to his family, Jessica would live with him because she promised him that she would always be there. Alex entered the room because of the noise. He wanted to check if everything was okay. A conflict broke out between the guys. Richard did not understand who the stranger was and what he needed, and Alex wanted to protect his mentor by any means. Having found out everything, the guys began to clean up the room, and after a while, Alex asked the girl if Richard was the Archmage. Jessica was surprised how he could know this if the boy did not use his magic with a new acquaintance, but as it turned out, Alex felt it. No one knows how, but he felt it. Having finished everything in the room, Alex asked the girl to take off her cape and went to wash it. Jessica thought about it, because one of the character traits of the High Priest in the future is hatred of werewolves, obsession from birth. In the temple, he studied the supremacy of people, so now he perceives werewolves as inferior creatures. And having stumbled upon him, he can be easily enraged, so the girl allowed him to follow her. If he really is the High Priest, then he will be disappointed in her. Taking off her cape, Alex was amazed. Jessica was ready for the fact that he saw her tail and would now be disappointed in her. He didn't even pay attention to the tail. He was very interested in the cape. It blocked magic. Such a thing was quite difficult to get. The girl asked if he saw anything else. Alex looked at the tail and said that he had already seen it. At first he was surprised because he had never been near werewolves before, but then he got used to it. Jessica was surprised that he followed her after what he saw, but he had his own reason for this. Only Alex wanted to tell her how he was interrupted by Richard entering the room with a cart of food. The next morning, a crowd of people gathered near the hotel. Everyone was looking at something. It was a carriage used by aristocrats. The carriage was intended for the Colin family. Standing next to her was the family servant, Colin, who was about to escort Richard to a meeting with his father. The guys got into the carriage and sent it to the estate. Richard looked out the window all the way and was silent. He was nervous. Jessica decided to write a letter to the director, saying that she had found Richard's parents, and now they were going to Duke Colin's estate. In the end, she asked him for forgiveness for not asking permission and taking the money. The estate prepared for Richard's arrival. The servants lined up to greet him. They approached the door of the Duke's office. The girl took her friend's hand to support and reassure. Entering the office, the Duke asked the boy to remove his hood. He followed his request. Seeing Richard and the earring in his ear, Mr. Colin rushed into his son's arms. The boy pulled away from him. He did not fully believe that this was his father, and that after so many years and the difficulties he had experienced, someone could be waiting for him. The Duke missed his son so much that every time he remembered him, it seemed like a dagger was being stabbed into his heart. But he spent a lot of time looking for his son, because he was his only son. The guys decided to leave, allowing father and son to talk, but Richard forbade Jessica to leave, otherwise he would follow her. The Duke was angry but controlled himself. He warned the girl that if his son cried, she would not get away with it. Jessica agreed to stay. They were brought tea and food. The father immediately changed his behavior. He pretended to be happy with the guests. From the moment their son disappeared, their lives changed a lot. Duke Colin told the children how, in search of his son, he tortured and killed people who tried to lie to him. The girl was shocked by this behavior, and that he tells this with pride. Dinner was ready. The head of the family ordered that dinner be brought to the children, and they could stay in the estate as long as they wanted. But first, he wanted to talk with Jessica. Richard was not going to be left without the girl and intended to go with her, but the servants took him away despite his screams. He began the dialogue with the fact that the children of the Archmage will not be able to get along with ordinary ones. Children have instinctive feelings, and they avoid those who are not like them. The girl said that Richard had a good teacher at the orphanage, the director of the orphanage. Thanks to his love and care, Richard grew well. The director took on the role of a father and handled it well. My father was pleased to hear this. He wanted to meet with the director. The Duke asked the girl if she thought at the reward that for helping to return his son, he could give her whatever she wanted. Nothing came to her mind. It would be difficult to cash out a sea of money, and she did not intend to live here. It was hard to take cash with her. But then an idea came to her mind, a small wooden house in the capital. He was surprised by this desire, but agreed, warning her that werewolves are prohibited from having houses in the capital. Mr. Colin saw Jessica's tale. There was an unspoken rule in the Empire that werewolves must belong to a clan or master, so they receive protection from the laws of the Empire while being at the very bottom. The girl had no owner. She could only return to the clan, as the Duke believed. The master offered her a special deal. He offered her to become Richard's sister, providing her with clothes, education, security, and a home. Mr. Colin handed the servant a letter, which she was supposed to give to the director of the orphanage, saying that the children had arrived well, they were safe, and he would invite him later. Jessica needed time to think about such a proposal, but the Duke hurried her with an answer. As a result, he made the decision for her and signed the adoption document. Mr. Colin believed that he would make Jessica a happy child. After the journey and conversation with the Duke, the girl was exhausted and lay down to rest. Richard and Alex were still arguing in the room. She lay there and thought that her work was now more or less finished. All she could do was return to the sanctuary and find an option to escape. But this would require money that she could not withdraw from the account. And she also needed a way to return fragments of the balance. Her thoughts were confused by Richard. He asked to give Alex a thrashing. The latter did not believe that the guys would always be together and eventually get married, becoming a family. Hearing this, Jessica was shocked, got dressed without saying a word, and left the room. She walked and thought about Duke Colin's words that all beast people receive magical powers after a period of growing up. It was dangerous to leave everything like that, so she had to learn to control magic. Lost in thought, Jessica ran into a stranger. His suitcase fell and opened. The girl wanted to help him, but he quickly packed everything and ran away. Jessica felt something was wrong. She was in a hurry to return to the estate before sunset. At that moment, someone was watching her. The strangers felt the magical power of the beast and saw a cloak that blocked the magic, but the energy still leaked out. Jessica left her hair on the road. The strangers picked it up and were at a loss what kind of animal she was. She had never seen one like this before, and her hair color was quite rare. The director read a letter from Jessica and thought that one day a were-lizard appeared in his orphanage. She was an ordinary 5-year-old. She didn't know how to restrain her powers. She was a naive and innocent girl. It was clear that she was well educated, but if she studied in the South, then she was probably more familiar with the language of the Empire, and the director did not understand how she came to their region and how she found Richard's parents. The director arrived at the place. Before getting out of the carriage, he pulled a mask over his face. An underground auction. It was the largest black market in the Empire, run by the Bright Moon Guild. A variety of items, jewelry, werewolves, and even people were sold here. The scale was so huge that even the emperor had to put up with it. The director's goal was to buy children here and take them to the orphanage. The preparations were perfect, but something unexpected happened. The man was shown a newly arrived product, a were-lizard, with a color unusual for everyone, very bright, a high-quality product and worth the investment, can be used as decoration. The best product today can be kept as a pet. The director was dumbfounded when he saw Jessica behind bars. She immediately took off her mask to say that it was him, and she shouldn't be afraid. He gave the girl instructions to sit silently. He would save her, but only if there was no information leak. The auction worker returned, and the director decided to look at the other children. Jessica sat in a cage and cried. She was kidnapped. She was walking home from the store. It was dark. She wanted to return home as soon as possible, but when she regained consciousness, she was in a cage. Vanessa remembered that Ariel ended up at the auction after her abduction, and here her relationship with the prince developed. She was saved by the director, and so, quite naturally, the director was able to get closer to the palace. Jessica heard a scream, and a second later, someone was thrown into her cage. The boy was angry. She immediately saw the girl nearby and attacked her so that she would lower her head in front of him. Even though she is a peasant, she should know some manners. The stranger did not let up. The stranger began to pound from the cold. The girl sat down next to him and covered him with her cloak. He moved away from her and urgently asked not to touch his body, since it was his treasure. Vanessa had a bad feeling. She remembered the prince from the original diamond gold hair, pale skin, arrogant, respects no one, with a mole under his left eye, eyes as red as blood, and an unfortunate minor character with an incurable disease. Oscar Growley, that was the name of the devilish younger prince. According to the original novella, the prince was already infected with the plague. Jessica was going to save him at any cost. She did not want him to die before her eyes. The prince thought that the girl was in love with him, so she was showing concern. But Jessica cut him off, saying that she already had a love that was not a bit like him. It was the main female character of the novel. The prince immediately softened. He understood and approved of any love. After that, he himself went to hug the girl. He was unbearably cold. Having accidentally lifted her cape, something touched him. He pushed Jessica away, but it turned out to be only empty sheets of paper and a pencil. Oscar took a pencil and paper from her and began to write about his condition. He was worse than yesterday. Cannot be compared with how it was before. It feels like he is getting worse with every breath. And perhaps this is his last letter. Near the Colin Palace, everyone was looking for the missing girl. Richard was crying. It seemed to him that he had lost his Bam Bam forever. The stones that Richard and Alex gave Jessica were real balance fragments. She put them in an envelope and was going to hide them in order to send them after the director rescued them. If she sends this letter, the development of the plot of the novel will completely change. The letter contains a recipe for a cure for the plague. It was developed by Crowley. Small bugs that are difficult to notice are carriers of the plague that struck the empire. After many experiments, Crowley found a repellent. This development became the discovery of the century in the short story. In addition, thanks to the Myler family, the medicine was distributed free of charge among the people. So gradually, the plague disappeared, and the empire avoided a crisis. Jessica sat and thought about whether it was worth doing this, because she was just a minor character in the novel, and by sending a letter, she would change the entire plot. The prince gave her his love letter and asked her to read it, so that she could evaluate what was written and say whether it touched her heart or not. The letter was dedicated to his beloved Lady Lily. He asked her not to avoid him anymore, because in the Empire there is no better, more handsome, stronger, and more charismatic guy. And if she avoided him out of embarrassment, then no longer, because there is no guy like him shortcomings, which means there are no problems. Jessica called the letter One Big Problem because Oscar only talks about himself and his wonderful qualities in it, but not a word about Lily. When writing to a loved one, the letter should show deep feelings and sincerity, but Oscar was not one of those guys. The boy began to cough up blood and waste away before his eyes. Jessica began to call for help, but there were only cages and a cold basement around, and not a soul else. The world's largest bright moon auction has been announced. Pushing people around, a man in a dragon mask entered the hall. It was Harry Myler. In response to Jessica's call for help, an angel appeared. It was Alex. He freed the guys from the cage, carried them through the corridors. There was absolutely nothing left before the exit when the prince woke up. He began to shout at Alex that he dared to touch his priceless body. The girl began to cover the prince's mouth, explaining that this was their savior, and they had almost escaped. There was less and less time left. The lots were selling out very quickly. The jester announced a special premium product, the one and only, incomparable to anything else, blonde with red eyes. And also, the next luxury item will be a lizard, a rare pink mutant lizard that was just brought in today. More importantly, it has a mixture of white and pink colors, a little clumsy, but capable of a lot. And it also has pink hair, Jessica realized. What they say about her. The man with the dragon mask stood up from his seat. The girl saw everything from behind the scenes and immediately recognized him. But then Alex shouted, it was time for them to run. The boy took them to the forest. The guys decided to wait a little until they found out about their escape. Jessica was very grateful to her friend, but Oscar still didn't know who this child was. The boy introduced himself, saying that he came at the call of his mentor. The girl interrupted his story and asked him to give letters to the people who were in the mansion. One to a man in a wolf mask, the other to a man in a dragon mask. Alex agreed, but in return asked him to hug him to freshen up. The guys looked at each other, not understanding him. Alex whispered in his mentor's ear that she was not a lizard. He created a protective barrier around the guys for a while he was not around. Jessica wondered, if she is not a lizard, then who is it? The auction workers discovered the loss, and the entire forest was full of guards with torches. Everyone was looking for the children. The guys sat very quietly, so as not to give themselves away. Oscar was the first to interrupt the silence. He was outraged that Jessica communicated with him informally, although there was a difference in status between them, like between heaven and earth. The prince tore up the letter written for his beloved. He was ready for death. He had to die before the winter ended. All his life, he was on the brink of death. Every new year, he did not know whether he could live to see the next one. His Highness collected various herbs and medicines, so he at least somehow lived. But this was his limit. He could not give a flower that would soon wither to such a beautiful girl as Lily. Jessica took Oscar by the collar and told him that if he returned home, he should ask the Mylers for insect repellent, an anthelmintic. If you use the repellent, the plague can be cured. The prince coughed again. The guards heard it and began to run to the tree where the guys were sitting. At that same second, Alex appeared and hid them. He laid Oscar on the ground, trying to heal him, But with congenital diseases, Alex was powerless. Besides, the entire forest was combed by guards, and they needed to get out. The letters were delivered. Jessica instructed Alex to take the prince, and they got out of the forest. The boy resisted at first, but then agreed with his mentor. She sat and waited for Alex to come back for her, thinking about the repellent, that if Crowley managed to develop it, the story would change dramatically. The girl practically gave herself away. She thought that the guard had found her, but it was Harry Myler. The gentleman felt the presence of his daughter nearby. When the pink lizard was announced at the auction, Mr. Myler immediately ordered the guard to take him to it, but they came across an empty cage. While the guards were finding out who was to blame for the children running away, an angel appeared to Harry and gave him a letter from Jessica. The letter contained an urgent and brief message. The girl wrote the ingredients for a cure for the disease spreading throughout the empire with a request to show this letter to Crowley, and an artifact was attached with a note that she did not steal it and an apology. Jessica sneezed and was discovered by Harry Miller. She covered herself with a hood and trembled with fear. She was sure that he considered her the thief of the artifact. He extended his hand to her, calling her his daughter and his family. The girl decided to extend her hand to him in return. The Duke asked to tell her what was troubling her. Jessica admitted that their relationship was just a game that would end, and she really wanted to find a family, and the last thing she wanted was to be rejected. Harry admitted that he had originally planned this, but without expecting it, his feelings turned out to be sincere. On the day when he had an attack, everyone ran away from him, but only Jessica came to his aid and was nearby. It was at that moment that Harry saw a real daughter in the girl. The girl was sure that he hated lizards, and she was just that. But the man said that he adored them, and he didn't care who he was. If he had said so right away, then everything would have been different. The gentleman promised Jessica to find her a teacher from the South and support her in everything. The girl asked only for one thing, to return home with him. He was happy and grabbed his daughter, Jessica Myler, in his arms. Harry Myler fulfilled his daughter's first request, ordering his servant to save all the werewolves at the auction and take care of its destruction. When Alex returned, he discovered that Jessica had left no trace of her departure. Someone had taken her. That night, the Duke's subordinates remained in the magical castle and carried out his orders. For some time, the walls of the castle were filled with screams and blood. Jessica woke up in a cold sweat from a nightmare. Looking around, she realized that she was in her room at the Colin estate, and her brothers were standing over her. They told her that the girl slept for 10 days. She had many questions about the cure for the plague, like Ariel, Alex, Richard. To be more precise, today was the 13th day. Everything had not been going well since Jessica disappeared. The head was very annoyed. The father looked so cruel that he was ready to kill everyone. Ariel was constantly doing something in her room. It became obvious to everyone that the nanny slandered the girl. They dealt with her. Crowley, having received the letter, did not sleep for several nights and worked on a cure. After Jessica disappeared, the plague increased greatly, and as soon as the letter arrived, they immediately made as much medicine as they could and sent it to different territories. A major outbreak of the plague was suppressed. The disease did not completely disappear, but everyone is gradually recovering, and all thanks to Jessica. The brothers asked to share their knowledge of chemistry and how she managed to get a recipe for the medicine. The girl was at a loss and didn't know what to say. Harry entered the room. He was very affectionate and attentive to her. Taking her hand, he said that he would always be on her side. The guys wanted to spend more time with Jessica, but the father took them out, giving his daughter a rest. The heir was going to register his daughter. For this, he needed permission from the royal family, since Jessica was not a blood relative. Emperor's Palace. The emperor greeted the Duke. He was very grateful to him for the cure for the plague. His son was recovering. Although His Majesty was happy, there were notes of sadness in his voice. The plague was defeated, but the congenital disease did not go away. He also thanked Harry about the auction. He cleaned it up nicely, and the royal family took care of the rest. The heir clarified that all the royal family did was appropriate all the laurels to themselves. Mr. Myler approached why he came to the Emperor. He handed him a letter that contained information about the adoption. The Emperor was surprised. Just recently, he received a similar request for a lizard girl. 2 days ago, Jessica was adopted by the head of the family, Colin. For several days in a row, the nanny tried to bring food to Richard, but he did not open the door to anyone from the very day Jessica left him. The director of the orphanage came to the door and asked to tell him that he had come to talk to Richard about Jessica. The boy heard this and let the director in. Richard was interested in one question, whether his girlfriend had been found, but all attempts to find her had so far been unsuccessful. The director brought a gift to the boy. It was Jessica's toy, her tiger. He hugged the toy and said that he hoped his little sister would come back soon. The director choked on his tea at what he heard. He was not aware that the Collins had adopted a girl. Harry was angry when he saw a copy of the adoption decision. The Emperor began to calm him down and explain everything that recently his lost son returned to Duke Colin and Jessica found him, and thus Colin just wanted to help the girl. The heir's anger did not subside. He refused to accept this adoption. His Majesty tried to bring the Duke to his senses. He reminded him of his 2 sons and that he should not disgrace them. Harry cooled down, remembering the last words of his late wife. She asked to take care of her sons, no matter what. The Emperor continued. He heard that Duke Colin's son thinks of Jessica as a sister. The Duke rarely asks His Majesty for favors, so he allowed the adoption. The only solution to this situation was to reach a common agreement between Duke Myler and Duke Colin. As he left, Harry said that if the applicant by chance disappeared or died, then the agreement would be terminated. At the estate, Ariel pounced on Jessica. She was very happy to see her. All this time, Harry Myler was furious. One of the brothers always hung out in the laboratory, and it was unknown what he was doing there. The second was a copy of his father, silent and arrogant. Only the presence of the girl made Ariel live. Vanessa remembered that it was around this time in the original, Ariel became very close to the brothers. People said that they had a special connection. The girls agreed to meet in the afternoon and go for a walk, but for now they went about their business. Behind her, Jessica heard a familiar voice. It was the head of the Myler family. He began to scold the girl for daring to run away without answering her question, and then returned as if nothing had happened. She began to cry. The head butler began to wipe away her tears and change the Duke's speech to a softer tune. Having wiped away her tears, Jessica laughed. The head was furious. He threatened to tear her lips off. Using magic, the heir entered the estate. He did not allow anyone to offend his daughter, not even her father. The girl ran to him. When Harry and his daughter left, the Duke asked for forgiveness for the time she turned into a lizard. He knew that she was not an ordinary person. He was just checking whether she was actually a werewolf. But this did not cancel the kinship test. If Jessica was going to become part of the Myler family, then it was necessary to find out where she came from. Harry brought his daughter 2 stacks of books on kingship, court etiquette, arithmetic, music, classical literature, law, art, reading, writing, and a foreign language, all of which she needed to study in 2 weeks. Studying so much material could cause some problems, but the girl would need all this when she received her birthday present. Leaving her alone with her books, the Duke went off on business before dinner. His daughter was next to him, but still, he was not left alone by the fact that she was officially adopted by Colin. Something had to be done about it. Night, Duke Colin stood near the tower and thought about how to take revenge on Harry Miller for the kidnapping of his daughter. He knocked on the gate. Colin wanted to look at the far side of the moon. Although working hours were over, they let him in. Mr. Colin was received with honorable respect. Attempts began to be made on his life, and he came to find out who was leading the killers on him. Tea was brought to the interlocutors, and the Duke began his long story. The killers began to appear a week ago. Every night, trained people tried to attack. Fortunately, they did not break into the rooms of his wife and son. The only thing he managed to find out was that one of the fallen called him a thief, although the Duke was a rich enough man to steal. Colin showed a photo of Jessica. His second request was to find his kidnapped daughter. She was last seen a month ago near the Colin estate. The Duke was told a sum to find the mastermind of the murder and find his lost daughter. He had to pay 2 billion gold. Colin believed that this was too much money for such requests. His interlocutor offered to buy him an album of Colin's wife where she was in infancy. The album was in a single copy, and then the Duke would receive a discount of 100 million gold. The Duke was furious. They tried to sell him photos of his wife, which were stolen, thus taking his money. As a result, he agreed to their terms and left with the album. Colin's interlocutor took off his mask. He was exhausted by the aristocrat. He was surprised by the request to search for Jessica. This was already the third person asking to find her. The owner of the auction appeared in the stranger's office. He was also looking for the lizard girl. He gave instructions to catch her at any cost, but that she would be alive. Jessica lay in her bed and thought that now Richard will grow up in love and care. And when he meets Ariel, he will already be the great master of the magic tower, and Alex will return to the temple and resume training. Everything is as it should be in the original novel. All she had to do was watch from afar. Although Harry and Ariel had not yet found a common language, they would become closer over time. It would be difficult. But deep down, the girl was happy for them. Having woken up, having put herself in order, Jessica went out into the corridor and saw Alex. He was glad to see his mentor. She didn't understand how this could happen. Harry watched this scene and asked his daughter if she knew this dog. The girl told him that she met Alex when she was in the shelter, but she did not understand how he ended up on the estate. Harry took the boy by the clothes and asked the servants to give him a bath, and then he could return to his daughter. The heir warned the girl that she should never follow a man, even if he says that he is her father, since her only dad is Harry Colin. Harry fell off his feet. His head began to spin. Jessica immediately realized that this was a berserker again. She had to help him. She called for help. She needed Ariel, who could help the heir with her magic. Jessica turned into a lizard again. Alex stood next to her, whom her brothers were trying to drive out. Harry brought everyone to their senses and asked the boy again what he meant about the fact that his daughter was not a simple lizard. All night, the heir sat near his daughter's bed. When she woke up, Alex entered the room and began to explain to Harry that the girl was now going through a period of growing up. Her appetite and the amount of food she absorbed would increase significantly. There will be other symptoms, such as pain. The father needs to pay a lot of attention to it. Body temperature and environment are also important. The gentleman did not know whether he could trust the young man, because he did not even know his name. Harry remembered that when the rays emanated from Jessica yesterday, his headache stopped, and he clearly felt something refreshing. A couple of days later, Duke Colin's estate. The heir of the Myler family was sitting with the Duke and drinking tea. He came to check whether Colin was alive or not. Colin realized that he was behind all the assassination attempts, but he did not understand what Harry wanted from him. Mr. Myler called the Duke a thief. The latter was furious that by showing up at his house, he dared to insult him. He showed Jessica's adoption document and explained that she was his daughter, and he was originally going to adopt her. But at one point, someone stole her from him. Harry suggested canceling Colin's adoption, because in any case, his daughter would be with him. Colin realized that Jessica was now at the Miller estate. The heir confirmed his suspicions. A parent's job was to protect his child, but only the real parent, that is, Harry Miller. The Duke recalled that when he met the girl, she was in an orphanage with his son. If the man really wanted to raise her, then why was she there? In addition, he checked that Jessica did not have a birth certificate. Myler did not believe him and believed that he could take better care of the child. After finishing the conversation, he turned around and left. Harry remained calm, trying to threaten Colin that if the latter continued, something would happen to him. Returning to the estate, the heir saw Alex sitting at the gate. His energy was very powerful. He ordered to buy a cloak for the boy. He will take it to the estate as a pet for his daughter.